It's a music stand, a plastic container, lid of a small box, camera, and none of these items individually are stable. Pretty good deal. That's a good deal. So cultural awareness as a healthcare. Alright, welcome back everyone. I'm so glad you clicked on this video because it's going to be a good one. Today I thought I would walk you through an actual occupational therapy session that I was a part of during my last 10-week placement in a pediatric clinic. If you didn't already know, I actually vlogged every single day of that pediatric clinic, except I think there was one Friday where like nothing happened, so I decided there's no point documenting this, but every other single day is here on my channel. So I'll put that up in the cards, the playlist, and as well down in the description box for you to check out. Alright, let's jump into it. Okay, some background information on the session. This session was my first session with this particular client. However, this wasn't the client's first session within the clinic, as I was taking over for another occupational therapy student. So for me in this situation, it was mainly rapport building. That was my student clinician goal for the session. So I was coming in the middle of a therapy block. This was a joint clinic run by speech pathology and occupational therapy. So the speechy student had been with this client for a number of weeks already, so their rapport had been thoroughly established. So my main goal was to try and build some rapport for the remaining weeks we had together. So as our client was school age, most of their goals surrounded their ability to participate at school. So one of their goals included organizational skills, so using specific strategies that we work on during sessions to help organize themselves at school and at home. For example, organizing school materials, as well as organizing their thoughts before, during, and after tasks. Another one of their goals that we worked on during this session was to develop written expression, which includes the content as well as punctuation, specifically for written tasks using thought organizational strategies. So there seems to be a theme of organization of school materials, organization of thoughts. So that's the basis for this session. Okay, so because I'm wanting to give you a realistic idea of how the sessions ran, what we did, what actually happens, I'm going to tell you all the boring stuff too. So setup and briefing before the session. Professional, graduated occupational therapists and speech pathologists don't necessarily do what we did before the session, but as we're students, we're learning, so learning and thinking out loud and debriefing and briefing was a big part of our learning process when we're on placement. So before the session, if we were lucky enough to have time in between sessions, so as the therapy rooms were used by multiple different student clinicians and clients, we didn't always have an hour or two beforehand to set up the room, as it might not be available. So we would firstly go in and set up the room. So that includes bringing our resources into the room, whether it's charts that we've used throughout the clinic block, throughout the therapy block. So we'd blue tack them up on the walls. We'd also have to consider how we would set up the room, in particular the furniture. So some of the time, parents would be involved with therapy sessions. The clinic encouraged parents to participate as much as possible, but that's not always the case. But for this client, the parent was heavily involved in their therapy sessions, so there was going to be 4 of us in the room. So 2 student clinicians, a client, and a parent. There was going to be 4 people in the room to arrange in place and think about where should I be, who's going to do what activity, because usually we would have a leader and a facilitator for each activity when we were working in pairs. So thinking through all these little nitty-gritty things before you get into the session. Otherwise, what I can only assume would happen is you're trying to think on the spot and move furniture around, and it can just waste time. So if you've at least started to think about, well, practically where should I be sitting in relation to the client, in relation to my fellow student clinician, the parent, all these things, that can really give you a good head start in getting into your session and having a productive session. Also, talking through the session with my speechy, because we didn't have a lot of time together outside of sessions, because she had her own schedule. She was a final year speech student. She had a lot going on, and I was just on placement. So we had to kind of think about what time we had together to talk through and create our session plans. So the 10-15 minutes we had before our sessions was really important for us to talk through what are our expectations, what are our goals for this session, just in case we had we had imagined activities differently in our heads, how they're gonna run, what we thought, oh, could you help me with this? If I look lost, can you step in if they say this? So just going through a few different scenarios, not overdoing it, but just making sure we're on the same page. I just talked a lot. Okay, we're not even in the session yet. Okay, now onto the session. Just a side note, I have no idea how long this video is going to be, because I feel like there's so much detail I could go into about the different parts and why we did them. So let me know down below if you would prefer a shortened, quick version, not really going into why we do things, or you prefer the more in detail version so you can get a better picture and understand our reasoning. Let me know. Okay, getting into the first 10-ish minutes of the actual session. The client has arrived, so we can start our session. Alright, the first 10 minutes for us was usually devoted to rapport building, catch up, what's been happening, and because it was my first meeting with the client, this time was incredibly important to be forming first impressions and starting to build that rapport with the parent as well as the client. So some easy rapport building questions that we would say, how's your week going? Addressing the parent as well as the client, making it a friendly conversation, as it can be quite stressful for some clients, especially kids, meeting new people and having things change. Our next question is usually, what happened last session? What do you remember? How did you go, if there was any homework set? What did you learn? Did you put anything into practice at school or at home? Also checking in with the parent on their observations. And for a lot of my clients during this placement, actually I think for all of them, we use visual schedules. So visual schedules give the child and you some idea of what's coming up in the session, some structure, some predictability. So for this particular client, because we were working on organization skills, something like time management and organizing the session before we started was something that was very in line with their goals. So what we would do with the client was have them think through, alright, well, we'd tell them this is the activity, we're going to do this, this and this today. You put them in order, what order do you think we should do them in? And then have them practice assigning times for each of the activity. So you know we have an hour. How long do you think we should take for our intros and hellos? So our hellos, how long do you think we should take for our goodbyes? Okay, 5-10 minutes? Alright. So for them, we'd actually take down the clock on the wall and we'd use little laminated animals, turtles, polar bears, with glue tack on the back, and have them put them on the clock to symbolize the start and finish of each activity. So it was also a visual reminder for time management, and also a motivator for the session, because they enjoyed, I think when we had different animals like a turtle, the turtle moved around the clock, and pieces of lettuce or something was what the turtle ate to show the ending of an activity and the starting of a new one. So they would do that at the start of each session and move it around the clock to practice time management. And a strategy we used throughout the session was asking them, how are we going for time? So reminding them to check in on the time and to be aware of how much time's left, how much time have we used, and staying on task. Okay, so our first activity was mind mapping, and mind mapping was one of the strategies introduced to address their organization goals. So it's something that they can use at school to plan ahead for writing tasks. So that was in line with their written expression goal as well. So we decided to incorporate a practice exercise of creating a mind map with rapport building. So we made it a mind map about me activity. So we each were asked to create our own mind map about ourselves and then afterwards present it to the group. So that was 4 of us, the parent, the client, and 2 student clinicians. So we each created our own mind map. And so for the client, they had been learning about mind maps and practicing them throughout the therapy block so far, so they were familiar with them. So something we asked them before we started is, so why do we use mind maps? What are they? When can we use them? So when are they helpful? So making sure, reiterating how they can use them in their schoolwork, as well as bringing out some examples of their work from previous sessions in homework to show them this is what we've done before, so help them reflect on how they've created mind maps in the past. We also wanted them to come up with the categories that we would use on our mind map. So what do you think is important for Thalia, so me, to know about you is something that the speechy would ask them. So using kind of guided questioning to support them to come up with appropriate categories. So do you think it's important that Thalia knows what you ate for breakfast yesterday? Do you think it's important for Thalia to know what your favorite color is, or who's in your family? So these things are actually something we would say, yes, that's important to get to know you. So guiding them when creating the mind map. So it was I remember it being a really nice activity because we all started talking and, oh, you play this instrument, I play this instrument. And I find when kids actually realize that you have some similarities and interests in common, it's kind of like, oh, okay, I could get along with this person, you know, we both play this instrument, or we both watch YouTube videos, or we both don't like this food. And it can make them, I definitely saw the client relax in this activity. So something we consider when creating sessions and within sessions, I think it becomes just super automatic when you are a therapist and you've had a lot of clinical experience, is understanding how to grade the activity. So thinking, I know in our session plans we would have to write step up and step downs for each activity. So that means how can we grade the activity up, so step ups, so making it more difficult, and that's usually removing the guides and the prompts that we would provide. And grading down or step downs would be, how do we make this a little bit easier, and how can we support the client more so they can achieve success? So it might be more prompts, and for the mind map activity it would be verbal prompts, more guided questioning, as well as examples of about me mind maps that we just found on the internet. So just kind of give them a quick prompt like, oh yeah, that could be important. Oh yeah, what I like to do on the weekends, or my favorite sports. Yeah, that's a good idea. So giving them that prompting if they seem like they're struggling a little bit. Because something important to remember is we're wanting to give them the just right challenge. So it's a balance of something they can accomplish with just enough challenge to keep them motivated to do the task. So something else I noted in a lot of sessions that we did at the clinic was having either scheduled or optional movement breaks. So a lot of kids that we saw would be movement seekers. They need a bit more movement to keep them regulated. So things we could use are move and sit cushions, which you might see in primary schools. We also had, I can't remember if there's probably a real name for it, but I can only think of them as the wobble stools. So I'll see if I can find a picture, but there was a stool where you could, like, it's kind of like sitting on a yoga ball, and I think people can use yoga balls as well for movement seekers, where you could kind of moving back and forth, and that gives you kind of the sensory movement input that you need. So a lot of our clients, well, a few clients that I worked with use that sort of equipment to help them stay focused and stay regulated during sessions. But also we might have scheduled movement breaks. So for this client, they didn't always need them, so it was an optional one. So if we saw them becoming dysregulated, or we would ask them, you know, do you feel like a crazy dolphin? So they were animals that referred to their level of regulation. So if you're a crazy dolphin or a crazy crab, you're just a little bit got too much energy, or you just need to move around a bit, but we want you to be more like a steady seahorse. So they were able to identify where they were on that spectrum. So by asking them, how are you going, do you feel this way, how do you feel, then we could make the decision of, do we need a movement break? So a movement break could involve a yoga dice. So that was just like a big dice that had different yoga positions on it, so you'd roll it. So just an activity that has movement in it. Usually lasts 5-10 minutes depending on how the child's going. But that mind map activity would have taken about 20 minutes, the intro probably 10 minutes, and this next activity probably was about 30 minutes, and then wrap up 10 minutes. Alright, so for this activity, so the main activity, we were designing a routine clock. Now this turned out really well. I wish I had photos and I could show you, but I'm sure I can find something similar on the internet to show you. This was in line with organizing their school materials when they're getting ready for school and at home. We used a clock. Actually, I have the same clock. This clock. It stopped working, so the time isn't right. So we used this exact clock. It's just from Kmart. And it took actually a lot of work. Not a lot of work, but a lot of thinking went into how we were going to design this routine clock and practically what materials and how we were going to do it. But I think what ended up happening is we laminated a laminating sheet with nothing in it, so it was just clear, cut, and then glue tacked it on the top. Because I think initially they thought we could take off the back and then draw straight onto the paper inside, but with this particular one we couldn't. But that's always an option. If the clock you're using, you can take out the back, but we just did a laminate sheet on top. So during this session we were planning for the routine clock. So what are we going to be having on the clock, how are we going to do it, all those types of things in line with our organizational goals. So organizing our thoughts, organizing tasks before, during, after, that sort of thing. They actually had a strategy or an aid. It's called the Goal, Plan, Do, Check, which is part of the co-op system. So Goal, Plan, Do, Check. So they had a personalized chart. So it has what's your goal for this activity, what's your plan. So we had steps, materials, goal, plan, do, and then check. How can we check that it's gone well? So we would have them think through, alright, what's our goal to make a routine clock? What do we need? So we'd prompt them to think about what materials we need. Oh, we might need pens, stickers, how are we going to do it? Have them think through that, and then how are we going to check it? So we also then we designed just on a piece of paper what we want it to look like. How much time does this take? How much time does this take? So if it's for a morning routine, so it's things like breakfast, getting dressed. So we worked out for an hour how much time does each thing take. So prompting them to think about how long does this take you normally, as well as working with the parents. Is this right? Are we forgetting anything? So planning it out. And in the next session, then we started to actually make the routine clock. But also during this time, it would have been an opportunity to practice problem solving. You know, if we might not have that piece of material, or what if that doesn't work? What's another way we could do it? So thinking through different scenarios and working on problem solving ahead of time. Alright, and on to the closure of the session. So about 10 minutes. This is when we talk about what did we do today? What can we take away from this? What can we keep doing at home? What should you work on this week? What's improving? What can we keep working on? Those sorts of questions. And also, we found it effective to set the kids a challenge instead of just calling it homework. So I want you to try and use your Goal, Do, Check planner at least twice this week and come back and tell me next week how you used it. Do you think you can do that? Alright. So it's kind of setting them a challenge, because a lot of kids like a little bit of competition and challenge. So again, it's checking in with the parent. How are things going? Any other questions? And then saying goodbye. And then packing things away, but most importantly, debriefing with our supervisor if they were able to watch the session, but also important, debriefing amongst ourselves. So with my fellow speechy student clinician and myself, how did that go? Oh, that went differently than I thought it did. Okay, so next time I know to do this and not do this, say it like this and not phrase it like that. I can also find it helpful to, when giving constructive criticism, phrasing it as a team effort. So maybe next time we can really try and keep them on track by doing this. Or we can do this, or I really liked how you did this. I wasn't sure how they really responded to that, so maybe we could try something different next week. Because I know it can be a little bit awkward giving someone else, especially when you feel like they have more experience than you, constructive feedback when it comes to fellow student clinicians. So I don't know, just an idea. If it works for you, let me know. Also, after a session, post-session, debrief, packing up, is progress note writing, the most exciting part. Paperwork, documentation. You wouldn't think there was a lot. Like you think, oh yeah, we just go have sessions, that's it. No, documentation, report writing can take up a lot of your time, no matter what setting you're in, especially in hospitals. I hear lots of health professionals in all different fields feel like a lot of their time is spent doing documentation. So we were writing progress notes for 2 clients we had together, so that probably took half an hour-ish. And the more experienced you are, the quicker it is to write. And also in different settings, they require different things from you when it comes to progress notes, as well as the format. So it could be SOAP format, it could be more of a narrative style, which is usually what we wrote in, at least for occupational therapy in this clinic. So this is what happened, this is what they did, this is what I saw, that type of thing. Also, after SOAP notes and after progress notes, it's planning the next session. So writing the next session plan. It never ends. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. It means so much to me that you're here. Think about subscribing and liking the video, and let me know down below please if this is the type of video you would like to see more of. Alright, I'll see you next time. Bye!